content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
I guess I sort of threatened to do one of those true crime roundup episodes where we just talk about different true crime news that's going on. I've been collecting different true crime things that are happening in the world, and it's interesting because I heard the episode go into the feed. I think it was this past week, and suddenly we're talking about I Should Agree, and it was weird because it timed with hearing us talk about the fact that we were not going to really go deep into that because there's more going on. I had multiple press releases and news articles about her again because they were starting to search properties. And I guess a lot of the true crime podcasts and YouTubers and stuff, I guess a lot of true crime podcast content creators, they had covered her a little bit, but I didn't go back to it yet because I felt like there was things going on that we couldn't see. Anytime you start to see search warrant returns and stuff, and I'm kind of glad we haven't yet because of the fact that they're still continuing to search places related to her. So I get a lot of flack from people who email in on this, which is fine. I get it. There's this other thing that I'm into, which is Maura Murray, and people kind of roll their eyes at me. And I've reached out to different people over the years that have turned that into this whole crazy conspiracy thing. I will say there is one piece of news that I found really interesting. And so today's case is a serial killer. It's not this person. This person is kind of the intro lead up to it. I'm only really mentioning him because something interesting happened. And I know that some of the content creators have been talking about this gentleman. And that's always a little fascinating for me, and particularly if there were going to be leads in Maura Murray's case that say she's not just sitting in the woods having wandered off, which I think that's your stance. It's definitely been my stance. I think she's somewhere close and just hasn't ever been found. But this one is interesting. So the Columbus Dispatch ran this article. A bunch of content creators had been kind of hyping it up. I think it first pops out March 19th, 2025. I know what I pulled to read was from Maria DeVito. And I did do a little deeper dive into what's happening here. But I wanted to talk about that because it was just that time of year where it's another anniversary in Maura Murray's case. But this article is from the local news up there, and it says, "Who is Stephen Baldwin? More on the animal advocate sent to prison for cruelty to dogs." Have you heard of this guy, Stephen Baldwin?
Only as it relates to what's just happened.
Okay. So Stephen Baldwin is described as a former Union County Humane Society leader and humane agent. He ends up being sentenced this year to more than 15 years in prison for cruelty to companion animals, grand theft, bribery, telecommunications fraud, tampering with evidence, and impersonating a peace officer. He has been in this newspaper, from what I can tell, more than 200 times. Most of those are related to him being an animal advocate worker and leader. But more recently, he's been connected to Maura Murray. Related to what he did up in Central Ohio, Maria's story says he served as the executive director for the Union County Humane Society In April 2013, PETA included the Union County Humane Society in a controversial video that blasted no-kill animal shelters for what PETA said were inhumane policies. PETA is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They showed a 6-second clip where a volunteer said the shelter would not take a cat because it was over capacity. There was a local social media campaign launched by Stephen Baldwin urging PETA to help the Humane Society meet a $30,000 shortfall on a recent $360,000 expansion project to serve more animals. So when he did this, PETA removes the clip of the volunteer saying, like, we can't do anything right now. So he leaves that organization in December 2013, and he starts his own animal cruelty task force, which was this private nonprofit organization. Now, to be clear, none of these animal cruelty things happening up in Ohio happened while he was there. He had then taken this new ACT Ohio and contracted with rural county humane societies to act as a humane agent. And according to what the dispatch reports and according to what shows up in court documents, he was helping police officers better deal with aggressive dogs. Now, sometimes pit bulls make the news as like having escaped and officers having to take them, and they end up being taken from their owners. They're marked as aggressive dogs. And when that happens, what this animal cruelty task force did, allegedly, was take them and rehabilitate them for a fee, and then to essentially rehome them with people who could take care of them or sanctuary them, put them somewhere that they were, able to live their life out. I find that interesting. I have, for many, 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 many years, owned dogs that are considered dangerous breeds. At one point in time, I had a smaller pit bull, and he lived with me off and on different places that I lived. And he ultimately went to my parents. And so this dog was pretty awesome, but also had like serious behavioral issues. But my dad and this dog bonded. And my mom would later say that like she loved having this dog around, even though he was essentially crated like a large portion of his day. And the vet had walked me through steps with him that he could be crated and it was okay as long as he was getting exercise. And my dad loved walking this dog. So in addition to that, for the last 15, 16 years, I've owned Rottweilers, which Rottweilers are often seen as a dangerous breed. And I've never had any trouble with them. I had one older Rottweiler who definitely appeared very frightening at times, but it was mainly for show. They're very loyal critters, and they do like to take care of their humans in their home place. What this guy was allegedly doing was taking these dogs, and the ones that he could not rehabilitate, he was taking a fee like he was rehabilitating them and then euthanizing them. So Stephen Baldwin, he's 44 now. He ends up being sentenced at 15 and a half years for all those charges, 32 counts in total. He had a bench trial in January of 2024. The specific statement of facts there includes that Baldwin was accepting dogs from pet owners and rescue groups under the pretext of rehabilitating them for a fee, but he would keep the proceeds for personal use and then euthanize the animals without permission. According to the attorney and the documents that were filed up in that area, ACT Ohio, or the Animal Cruelty Task Force, has ceased all operations. What does that have to do with Maura Murray? Okay. According to something that James Renner put out and that the Dispatch has gone wide with, I think he still has a podcast out there that you can listen to called True Crime Weekly or something like that. There's a link here. So Maura Murray goes missing February 2004. So that's 21 years ago. She had had a crash up in New Hampshire. We've talked about her at length. She's in one of Renner's books. She's in multiple other podcasts. According to James Renner, Stephen Baldwin and Maura Murray were at West Point at the same time in the early 2000s. But Stephen Baldwin was going by his birth name, which was Stephen Finkelstein.
He chose Baldwin?
He chose Baldwin.
Whatever.
So James Renner reports that the two of them were in a relationship for some time, and that Stephen Baldwin was Murray's chosen student representative in front of a judicial review board for a disciplinary case. And if I understand this all correctly, she had taken some things when she was at West Point.
Yeah, it was makeup. It was stupid.
Yeah, it was like little things. It was makeup. Yeah. And so Finkelstein was her representative when she had to go before basically the honor board. But after police arrested Stephen Baldwin in August of 2020, his fingerprints went into APHIS. And shortly after the fingerprints went into APHIS, the New Hampshire State Police Cold Case Unit contacted the Ohio police, and they informed them that Stephen Baldwin's prints were on evidence in the Maura Murray case. According to Renner, Baldwin was told in spring 2024 that his fingerprints had been found on either a CD or a CD case in Maura Murray's car.
What was it?
What do you mean?
Whose music was it?
We don't know. They haven't released other information. But according to Stephen Baldwin, he had nothing to do with her disappearance.
Well, it sounds like only James Renner knows this, maybe.
Well, I haven't. I don't know how he would know it at this point.
It's in the papers, though. I mean, right?
Yeah.
It goes on here to talk about a possible connection. I would say that the reason I ask what was the CD is because,
you could time it.
Come out.
Yeah, you could time it. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. So I was just thinking back to college times, and I remember a specific person, and I think of it this way because like how could his fingerprints be on something she has now and like no one know anything about it? But CDs were kind of different back then. Do you remember?
Well, right. And I feel like, James Renner seems like he's like even older than we are maybe, but it seems like newer true crime absorbers, they may not understand it completely.
Yeah, so this is why it's interesting to me and also possibly like a non-thing for me too at the same time. My kid moved out last year and took a bunch of music. Right. Now, most music is streaming, but in this day and age, I have kept kind of lots of different media. I still have tapes and I still have records. One of the things my kids wanted to take was a massive CD case. And it was like one of those big padded cases. You open it and you flip out many, many CDs. Like, I think the case holds like 100.
Right. And I don't think people even have any idea. I mean, young people.
Yeah, I think that would escape a lot of people. I've even seen something recently on Quora or Reddit or something where someone was asking, like, what did we do before? How did we take music on the go? And this was a case I kept in my car. What's interesting about it is I had an opportunity to be like, hey, what's in my CD case, like in the back area where nobody really goes? And I say that because the last 10 CDs or so were mixed CDs that people bought me. Mm-hmm. And I say bought me, but that's not even really...
They burnt them for you.
Yeah, they would burn them from MP3s and they would make them. The oldest one that was in there for me... because we found my kid was able to find a couple of CDs that would have been from college friends, but like right after college for me. But the oldest one that was in there, I remember when I got it. I got it in the summer of 1996. And I was thinking about it. there are two different people's fingerprints who could have been on that CD. That like if something happened to me and that CD case was found, and for some reason they dusted it for fingerprints, those two people, the last time they saw me would have been 1997 or 1998. But if they were found today, it's potentially possible that their fingerprints could be on the CDs in the case. They would definitely be on like the jewel cases, which were these little crystal plastic cases that, you know, you get the CD in. But those are in my house somewhere in a box. And I don't think that anybody would have any reason to go hunting to find that box. I don't even know if I could. I know they're here. I just don't know that I could find them.
Right. And so,
where am I headed with all this? Is that what you're about to ask?
yeah.
Well, depending on what songs are on the disc, you could age the CD. Like,
Well, right. Just like and if it's somebody's CD, it came out at some point.
correct.
And she bought it at some point. But I just realized that actually Renner is the source on the article.
Oh, yeah, I believe that he is. I think that he...
Okay. And so, you know, this is a guy who, he's done a lot of work on the case. At some point, he made a fictional assertion that really irritated me. And I lost all respect for him.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever had tons of respect for him beyond him being true crime related.
I wouldn't say that I had a ton of respect. It was very neutral, right? Like, okay, whatever. He's like this, you know, self-proclaimed expert on her. But he started talking he was just making things up. And it was completely inappropriate. And it really irritated me. And so I don't know if this is true or not. I can't really remember, like, how did they dust all her CDs? I imagine she had a CD like book, like you were talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
picturing.
did they dust all those and put all those into APHIS? I mean, that'd be crazy, right?
Well, she had also packed up a bunch of stuff like right before she left. And
Right.
and that's, you know, that's sort of a time, I do remember a time like kind of between places. And I'm not saying that's when she disappeared, because she kind of disappears after the semester has started.
Right.
But for me, I remember a time where you would pack up for winter break. At least this is how it was in the 90s. And when I would pack up for winter break, I would I definitely would find things that I hadn't seen in a year or two. And like some of those things ended up on my car seat, where I would particularly when it was like music related tapes and CDs and things, depending on which year and which car, I would have a CD player or I would have a tape player in the car. And like I would move that to like the front seat or back seat of my car where I could access it if I was going on a road trip to have music I hadn't heard in a minute.
Right, which is exactly what I picture happening there, right?
Yeah, so depending on if it's like a burnt CD or if they came forward and they were like, hey, it's this release from 2003, and he's saying he hasn't seen her from 2000 or 2001 or whatever, and it's his fingerprint is on a CD that's released after that or has music on it where it's released after that, that would be interesting to me.
So we know that there were witnesses to the last moment she was known to be driving the car and have the wreck, right?
Yep.
We know there was no guy there.
Correct.
Okay. And so what? He was the only person that could find her after she went missing?
I'm just saying, like,
well,
this is such a strange thing.
Right. And it honestly, I feel like it's completely irrelevant. I'm not saying that it's not factual. I don't trust James Renner. And it seems like that's an odd thing for them. I mean, maybe it was the, only fingerprints they could find or whatever.
Yeah.
But that just seems like a really odd thing. I wonder if it was in the CD player. I don't even know if her car had a CD player.
She had that Saturn. I probably did have a CD player.
I mean, I don't know. That's a transitional time, really, right? Depending
Yeah.
on what year your car was. And, some people had aftermarket things put in, and it doesn't really matter. But I mean, is the theory that like he CD'd her to death? Like, because
they're just trying to put somebody that's had contact with her and lied about it that has other charges, because they're like, so the stuff against this
which
guy
is
is serious,
completely
but
well,
not murder.
it is serious, but it's also just what we're like, we don't know what really happened, right? In his case, but we know he was convicted or pled or whatever. And it was kind of one of those, like, you're an awful human being things, because he was taking people's dogs, promising, oh, they're going to have a good life and I'm going to rehabilitate them. But he was just taking money and then killing them.
Yeah.
Okay. That's terrible, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure what drives one to do something like that. It sounds like a not so well thought out plan, considering the like what ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
Because you killed a bunch of dogs and now you're going to jail. So how was that worth the money you were getting? I just don't see it. But so we don't know anything about him, really. And I would say that touching somebody who went missing CD at some point in time is not really something to get really excited about.
Yeah.
I imagine that if they dusted for fingerprints like that on that level, his fingerprint can't possibly be the only one they found. And he may be the only one in APHIS, but I don't know that. I would find it very strange if they dusted a whole lot of stuff in Mara Murray's car after she ran away from a car accident. That would be really weird.
You think they're digging to find things that, like, from what they had left, or you think do you think this is made up?
Honestly, I do. Yeah.
Oh wow, I hadn't thought of that. And the way that this
and so I prefaced my whole conversation with, I don't have any respect for James Renner.
Okay, so
which is why I said that, because I don't, he made up a whole thing about like Mara Murray got pregnant and like she ran away and blah, blah, blah. And I was so ticked off at that, because that was so just misogynistic and presumptuous and none of his business, right?
Well, I spun back around to this one because this ancient website that I'm on, I was following a thread about Mara Murray, and I got an update to like an old email address. And so I'm on a website called mydeathspace.com, where it's a bunch of threads where they talk about like the more popular true crime cases. And so I did not hear about this from the Columbus Dispatch. I went and found that. I was trying to legitimize it. But what I found was this update came to me. And when I got the update in my email, I was checking the email for a completely different purpose, and it said, updated Mara Murray case, thread, blah, blah, blah. So it took me forever to log in. I logged in, and it's so funny that you say it the way that you're saying it, because the people in that thread, they don't call James Renner. They call him Jeremy Renner because they can't remember who he is. And Jeremy Renner is like the actor from Hawkeye and so many other things, The Hurt Locker. Wow. And like, so, and they have a negative opinion of the whole concept of writing books and talking about Mara Murray. So
well, just to be clear, the thing that caused him to be like not even close to crossing my mind was that specific situation and how bad it was, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to disparage him, except like what he did it was not good. It was a really terrible move on his part. I feel like over the years, I think we read some of his books and stuff.
One of them, yeah.
He's, no question, he is obsessed with Mara Murray, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
And then when he started just writing fiction about her life and what happened to her, it just irritated me because it wasn't his place to do that.
Yeah.
And it was it was wrong. And it was none of his business. And if you want to talk about Maura Murray in context, that's fine. But he has no evidence of any of the stuff that he put forth.
Right.
And, so how is anything he says credible? Now, so who gave him the tip? Because he is the source on this article. So he's the only one, right? Have you seen anybody else say it?
No. I mean, I've seen people report what he's reporting. I've always had questions about him. I think the book that we read was the True Crime Addict book, right? It was about Maura Murray. He's interesting. He works quite a bit in fiction and he works in true crime. He falls into this very small list of true crime content creators that I'm fascinated by because I genuinely think that like things that go on in their personal lives kind of spill over into their content reporting.
Well, it's, we skip around a lot of cases. We go, sometimes we go deeper into stuff, but I mean, can you imagine however many years he's been obsessed with this case?
Yeah, it's been a really long time.
And I realized at a certain point, he was just just making things up. Now, if I find a different source, fine. If somebody can confirm that, I know that James Renner doesn't just have random access to APHIS, okay?
Yeah, actually, I would probably have better access to APHIS than he does. And, I've never thought to look up something like that.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't.
I don't – the two worlds don't collide for me. They're not allowed to.
Well, I know. That's what I'm saying. But so why is he getting it, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's developed some interesting sources over the years. It could be something like that. I don't know is the answer. I just thought this was like a kind of a controversial piece of true crime news, and I wanted to hear your take on it. And what I find interesting is that you kind of immediately dismiss it, which I didn't really think to do that, but I immediately was like, that can't be something real, can it? I was considering whether it would be anything worthwhile.
Right. Well, all I'm saying, I mean, it could be real. It could be that Stephen Baldwin's fingerprint is on a CD that was in Maura Murray's car when she went missing, is my understanding of what's being said there, right?
Yeah.
And that after his arrest, because his fingerprints were put into APHIS, there was a match made, and that James Renner somehow found out, and he has put it out, and he has said he has given a recap of what has happened to Stephen Baldwin criminally, right?
Yeah.
To obviously suggest, he was there and euthanized her or something. I'm not really sure what he's suggesting, but there's got to be a correlation, right? He's a bad person, right? The problem is there are multiple witnesses who had no skin in the game, right?
Yeah.
Who said there was nobody with her.
Right.
And so it's irrelevant, which is also why it's weird. Why do they have all this DNA? What? DNA, fingerprints. It's fingerprints, right?
Yeah, it's fingerprints.
Okay. Go ahead.
At one point I had read, and I don't know where I got this from. So the source is dubious. I tried to find it before we recorded today in order to mention it. But what I remember hearing or reading was that there was a CD or something that she could listen to music on, and that the song that would have been, I think, playing on this, and I want to say that it was like a Discman with a plug, maybe. Do you remember those? You had to plug it in a different way to sometimes
you had to use a tape player.
Yeah, sometimes you could put a tape in there. So I don't know if that's what I read or if it was actually there was a CD player in the car. But I want to say that the last song, quote, she would have been listening to driving was either a single or the album, and somehow they were able to look at the playlist or whatever, the track list. Maybe when they were able to if they were able to crank the car, maybe that's what made them say it. But I heard that it was the New Radicals. I think it was the single "You Get What You Give," which would have been a 1998 song. So if it was on something like that, I don't even know how this comes into being a conversation.
Well, the fact that anybody knows all that information is astounding to me.
Yeah, and like I want to say, I don't know where I got that piece of information from. I remember putting it
There was a
with his
lot.
story.
I mean,
This is one of the, like, the first big internet mysteries where by the time people really knew about this case, there was certainly a significant amount of coverage and digging and a lot of different things going on there.
I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to say like, oh, he's lying. I would need to see more information. And I feel like the reason, like, when we get stuff from kind of, it's not law enforcement, it's not official paperwork or whatever.
Yeah.
It's because it doesn't matter, right?
That case has multiple problematic true crime creators attached to it over the years. Like people on my list of, probably not going to do anything with those guys. Unfortunately, James Turner falls into that along with the other people because so many weird things have been done. And
I mean, it's just, they may be perfectly fine. It's just, given what my experience is, court documents and even law enforcement sometimes are a little bit and dubious. I mean, they're not doing it on purpose, but like they don't have a bigger conceptual understanding and they may say the wrong thing that causes a big problem or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but I do think that it is it seems to me that type of headline and everything involved in that is a little bit of a reach.
Yeah.
And it also seems to me like, tell me that it's his fingerprint was found in Maura's blood.
Yeah. That's where we, you're right.
Because without more information, the fact that, law enforcement hasn't said anything, it just seems like now, don't get me wrong. I feel like it's not completely Renner's fault that he legitimately had an interest in it, got obsessed with it. And then I feel like that can do a lot of things to your brain, right?
Yeah, you have to have a hard line, and like we've learned in the years creating different types of content. I think we actually learned this before we ever started creating content. You have to be able to go, okay, that's too far, and now I'm going to come back and I'm going to let that case go for a while.
Right, and in my opinion, this was too far and weird, and unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more. You mentioned Aisha Degree. I'm seeing more and more that these cases coming back around are not, they're tragic, but they're not as interesting as the appeal of them not being solved seem to be, right?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it won't matter that his fingerprint was on the CD.
Yeah, I have a feeling that might turn out to be what we get here. I don't know. I mean, I know people are like not wanting banter in podcasts or whatever. Look, this is not banter. We're bantering about true crime. I brought up a piece of true crime news. I thought it was interesting. It is the time of year that, like, if you're going to talk about Maura Murray, the springtime is the time to do that. Go ahead.
It would be nice for her case to be solved.
Yeah, if someone found her and could start piecing the time, her and I should agree. Like both of them, that would be interesting to me to have those cases wrapped up. And I think we're coming into a time where we have less mysteries. So I think those older mysteries stay in the headlines because of us having less mysteries today. But I think there are still mysteries that other people could latch onto.
Keep in mind, it takes time for cases to really get that mysterious tag, right?
Yeah.
Part of the thing is, with Age to Degree, it's been 24 or 25 years. With Maura Murray, it's been 21 years.
Yeah.
And so it does take some time to sort of age the case. And the cases that end up like that, they're not really that many of them. And the reason is because most of the time the case gets resolved one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
And when you're getting into, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, like, I feel like if it's not solved and it does end up into that mystery case pile where it's just like 20 years or more have gone by, it's not, there's not a huge chance it's going to be solved, right? DNA sort of skewed that curve a little bit. But I mean, like DNA, genetic genealogy DNA, into solving it. But when it ends up being solved, it's a big deal, even if it is just, the typical crime or accident or whatever happened, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of those recently being found in water. I think I sent you 3 or 4 in a row.
And I just love it. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously that is common sense, right?
Yeah.
But you have to think about it and articulate it, right?
Yep.
And over time, I realized, like, oh, all these people who are in vehicles, like, they're in water somewhere because it's really hard to get rid of a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I said it out loud. And then, like, of course, other people were thinking it too. And, there's people who expend lots of time, effort, energy, and resources, volunteers a lot of times, are going and actually finding these people, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. I'm so glad. For a while during our show, I would actually pick out the most likely body of water they were in.
Yeah, we did that quite a bit when we were doing more
But I'm not a diver, right? I'm not gonna do that. It would actually probably, I don't know what I would do. I would probably freak out, like, to be in that position, to have to go find the vehicle, right?
Yeah. I've had one that I've looked for recently. Like there's one kid down here. I'm pretty sure I have like a rough idea of where he went. And I every once in a while I'll go down there and drive around. We talked about him on the show. But I go down there and drive around because I'm curious. Everybody made such a big deal after he went missing and his car was gone, and it was like definitely a murder. And I happen to not think that's the case. And at some point we'll go back and talk about some of the things I've done there too. But we do have a serial killer for the next couple of episodes. And we'll probably do a little talking at the beginning of them, but I'll try and keep the episodes proper, like, together. I had been pitching a television show about serial killers who killed themselves or like didn't reveal their secrets. And that sort of fizzled out with some of the things that happened with the particular network I was pitching to you, because I had a lot of early stuff from Israel Keyes FOIA files that nobody had thought to redact. And like I had photos and things that, like, if you were to get the FOIA files later, they would not have those photos and videos in them. And I had wanted to use some of those and use him for season 1 on, serial killers who hadn't revealed their secrets. I had to take a lesson from what you were just talking about, which is like, I don't care to do tons of Keyes work anymore, because like I have like 10 or 12 things that I think I've come to the conclusion on, and until those things are wrapped up, there's nothing left to do. And I have like a list, and like I think you disagree with some of my list, and like we've talked about different couples and pairs over the years, but ultimately like I still have an interest in serial killers, so I've been trying to apply it to some lesser known killers. They're gonna start working their way into True Crime Excess.
That's funny because with Keyes, he's always the first. I check his timeline with every single person.
And that, like, yeah, there's a period of time from like 97 or 98 to about late 2011, early 2012 that I look.
Every single like person who shows up that are missing, and like I always look at the timeline to see if he was in the lower 48 or whatever they call it, after he moved to Alaska or whatever. So I don't think about him very often, but in certain circumstances I do, because I will be forever trying to putting in a pile anybody that could possibly be his victim.
Yeah, I think that's one of my issues with his kind of mystery that he has surrounding him. I confess that within the last week, I think I sent you one that like for a long time I never talked about him on the show, but I had this missing person, and I was like, this is such a weird missing persons case. Like, I didn't say that to you when I sent it to you, and you didn't say anything back about it. But
I looked at the timeline on that though. It looked like he was in Alaska.
Yeah, but see that's why I brought it up, because I figured that's what you had done.
I have the timeline on my phone. I'm not even kidding. Like, I can look at it in like seconds.
I have a lot of photos from Samantha Koenig and from the Vermont searches that like weren't released afterwards, and I have a video of that. And like every once in a while, I'll go back digging through, see if there's anything there. Like I have the complete search photos unredacted from Keyes's house, and like I don't know why, but like I got a warning I needed to destroy them at one point, and that they needed to send me an update, and like I had to pay for it. But so that was not part of a FOIA request. One of the things I did a long time ago, back in 2014, was I was learning how to do public records requests, which is where you and I got some of the material that like the other content creators and podcasters did not have, because I had read a book. I think it was probably J.T. Hunter. I had read a book about him, and I knew a lot about him before I was ever podcasting or doing anything related to podcasts. And I had gotten some local records that they didn't know it was going to be such a big thing by the time,
I still don't think he's really all that big of a thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things I keep running into with him too. And that was ultimately the problem that we had doing a whole season on like the unsolved stuff related to him, was like, how do you want to link all these people to him that like I have this list of? And really I was thinking, highlight those crimes to try and get them solved, rule them out for me, help me rule them out. Like once those are ruled out, I feel better about them, but that neither here nor there now. But the serial killer that I picked out for us to kind of move forward on in a couple of episodes is another one of those with a huge number next to him. And I ultimately think this guy, he has some really interesting stuff going on. I'm not going to bury the lead because we already talked for like an hour about all this other stuff. But this is Carl Watts. Have you ever heard of Carl Watts?
I believe it's pronounced Coral.
That's his nickname that he gets. Yeah. So
you know why they say that, right?
The Coral, because he's Southern.
Yeah. No, it's because that's how Southern people say it.
Oh, okay.
That's how they say Carl.
Carl. Well, I remember the Coral memes from The Walking Dead where people always talking about Carl.
Carl.
So I wanted to cover him because he is one of those killers that's really interesting to me, and like he's not one because of the things that have sort of happened over the years with him. I think I sent you an article related to him that was like not even 2 years old. And I'm not gonna spoil his story, but I did want to talk about him. I want to talk about his early days and try to get into like the kind of what we know about him today. And he is one of those that like I have a profile. I have a lot of articles about him. He is a very interesting man.
Did you see on his profile that it says Coral Eugene Watts?
Yeah. Yep. And I don't think that's inaccurate because like we're going to find out like in the first like few paragraphs of what we're going to talk about, like we're going to find out that was a thing.
Don't you wonder like, okay, so what other details might be off? But no,
I always wonder, like especially when it's law enforcement sources. Now I will say I have some issues with law enforcement that'll come up at some point on the show. I'll say it that way. So Carl Eugene Watts, he's born down in a place called Kylene, Texas, which we've talked about at length on here before. His parents are Richard Eugene Watts and Dorothy Mae Young. His birthday is November 7th, 1953. At the time, His father was a private first class in the Army, and his mother was an art teacher for kindergartners. According to what I've read, they were married up in a place called Coalwood, West Virginia. Now, since Richard was only a private, he was transferred around. The area that he's transferred to initially is what's known as the Texas Bermuda Triangle. He was selected to be part of a team that was being put together, and Kylene was selected to be the location for that team. But he was part of the Tank Destroyer Tactical and Firing Center team. So that's how they end up down in Texas. And it had been chosen as like the site for what was essentially a pretty big deal. It's been moved around a little bit. But shortly after Carl's birth, and when I say shortly, I mean Carl pops out 3 days later. They moved back to West Virginia. The reason they moved back to West Virginia is to have better support systems in place for raising Carl. And about a year later, in 1954, Sharon, so Carl's little sister, is their second child, is born. Now, Carl's parents, Richard and Dorothy, they're not getting along. And they get divorced before 1956 rolls around. So for the early parts of Carl Watt's life, he is raised by mom and mom's family. And in 1962, Dorothy, or Dorothy May, she marries a man named Norman Caesar, who's a mechanic. And they're going to have 2 more kids. They're going to have 2 little girls. So Carl is going to be the only boy for a time with 3 sisters. And when Dorothy May and Norman Caesar get married, they're going to move away from West Virginia. So when Richard leaves, it's in 1955. So this is his dad. He literally goes out for a pack of cigarettes. Dorothy works as an art teacher. They end up moving to a place called Inkster, Inkster, Michigan. And they kind of go back and forth between here and Coalwood, West Virginia, because in Coalwood, West Virginia, Dorothy's mother, Lula Mae Young, lives. So Carl was attached to his grandmother. And he would acquire the Coral nickname because his cousins had a distinct accent. And they would draw out the letters in Carl's name until it sounded like Coral. Carl liked being called Coral, and he would imitate his cousins' accents, and he started talking like that. According to some of the things I've read, Carl asked his mother to change his name to Coral. And the definition that's included in the profile and kind of some of the things that have been said were that it was because a coral reef is a beautiful thing that is dangerous to touch. By all accounts, he liked going hunting for jackrabbits with his grandfather. And while he was in Inkster, Michigan, he tried very hard with his homework, and it would get him good grades. But Carl had a lot of struggles in school. He also had trouble with his stepfather. The reason that, we're up in Michigan with this family is Dorothy May was able to work as a high school art teacher and make a little bit of money up there. The problems with Norman Caesar made it very difficult for Carl to adapt to how his new family was set up. And Norman and others allegedly referred to him as a mama's boy. And they would say that he would worry about losing his mother's attention to his sisters. So Carl really enjoyed it when he was able to go back and see Grandma and Grandpa. And Grandpa taught him how to not just hunt rabbits, but to skin rabbits. And it is referenced as one of those sort of sensational things later, that they thought it was unusual that this young boy likes to skin rabbits. Carl and his sister, when he's 8 years old, so 1961, they contract meningitis. The meningitis is really serious for those of you who don't know much about it. It's its own rabbit hole if you want to go down and see some disturbing stories. It nearly killed Carl, and it caused him to be held back a full year in school. And the way that he was treated was they took him into Herman Kiefer Hospital, which is up in Detroit. It's like a city-owned hospital. He had to be kept in solitary isolation away from other patients, and he had to undergo spinal taps. According to some accounts that you can read over the years about Carl Watts that are all kind of working in hindsight, Carl Watts' body temperature got so high that the doctors at the time were worried that it might have caused him some brain damage. And according to family members who've been quoted over the years, including in court documents, they noticed that when he was 8 years old versus after getting out of this hospital, his personality had changed. And they described him as being very, very quiet, shy, bashful was used, and introverted. They said that his attention span had severely suffered from whatever had gone on there, and it affected his memory. So he had a very poor memory. When he gets back to school after being held back a grade, he struggles to keep up with the other kids. And he would be up all night. He struggled with insomnia as a result of having had meningitis. According to his accounts later on, he began to have violent dreams about battling witches, and this interrupted his sleep cycle. When he's later questioned, he comments on this. Now, Detroit Hospital takes good care of him. They do get him back into school. And this is when he's released from the hospital, this is when Dorothy actually gets remarried to Norman Caesar. One account that I read said that there were 6 children from the Caesar family that became a part of Carl's family at this point. So they have 2 more kids. She already had 2. There's 10 children at this point. So that whole mama's boy thing might not be as irrelevant as we think it is. Because I don't know about you, but I grew up in a house with 3 siblings, and attention could be difficult to get. But can you imagine growing up with 10 kids in the house?
No, I can't. And also, there's already issues there as far as, he didn't like his stepfather or whatever.
Right.
I know we don't have a whole lot of details on that, and we don't know how old they were or anything like that. But depending on that, because we know that he had his sister and then his 2 half sisters,
yes,
who are the later children. So I could see where that could cause, it could cause a lot of things, honestly. I mean, there's really no way around it, but growing up with siblings is hard. I think that growing up with step siblings can be just as harder.
I think it's the ones that I think what can cause the most interesting dynamic to develop is when your parents have new children with a new partner that then are your half siblings. I do think I think that the other 6 kids is probably a weird situation for someone who was used to a certain amount of attention from mom.
Right. And so I don't even know that his attention seeking even changed, right?
Yeah.
And especially since he was her first child, that's a perception thing, right?
It really is. So the way that Carl's sort of early years go from after this meningitis thing is, so he's missed the third grade. He has to repeat the third grade. And by all accounts, by 1968, it's going to be reported that he is still only reading at a fourth grade level, even though he's going to be 15 years old at that time. Now, by all accounts and recounting, whatever is going on with Carl, he keeps it inside. He would get upset at times, but he wasn't violent or abusive towards any of his siblings. He was never abused by his parents, except I think I'm going to phrase this. I'm going to frame this that the way it's all phrased in the court documents, I think they're specifically referencing physical and sexual abuse does not occur. I don't know whether or not the same would be true for just out and out psychological or emotional abuse or belittling. Does that make sense?
Verbal. Yeah, it makes sense.
So Carl turns out to be really good at sports, and he burns out a lot of his frustrations and a lot of his energy being an excellent, by all accounts, baseball, football player, and track star. He actually ends up winning a Golden Gloves boxing title, and he pursues this for a bit with the middleweight division, but the first time that he gets knocked out by an opponent, he gives up. That's a little later in life. So after this spell with meningitis, some different problems come to be. By the time he's 12 years old, he is starting to talk about these fantasies he has from these nightmares. And the way that like he sort of takes control in his like what might be lucid dreaming is he begins to kill the women in his nightmares. And that's not to say like he's like literally killing them. I'm saying he is somehow having fantasies, whether they're daydreams or they're strictly nightmares, that the people that are hurting him or torturing him in whatever manner in his dreams, Carl in his dreams is killing them. So we have some interesting things happen here. 1969, when he's 15 years old, he has his first run-in with police. He was a paper delivery boy. He's living, just outside of Detroit, Michigan. He attacks a 26-year-old woman for seemingly no reason. He punched her in the face until she screamed, and then he left. And then he just continued on like everything was totally normal on his paper delivery route, and he went home. 4 days later, he's arrested, and his only comment that we have a record of is that he said, I don't know, I just felt like beating someone up.
Okay, and so to me, that's pretty much, there's no question that happened. He did that, etc.
Yeah.
Okay.
So September 2nd, 1969, after having this run-in, which I believe the run-in is listed as June 25th, 1969, so that's when he punches this woman and assaults her. So September 2nd, he has taken the Lafayette Mental Clinic. This is going to be a forensic psychiatry center in Detroit, Michigan. They're going to start evaluating him. And it's found out at this time that Carl's been having sex and that it doesn't seem to be a thing that like he cares much for. The way that this is dealt with either in the family or through this clinic, I don't have a reference for this, but they tell him that sex is wicked. So being evaluated in this clinic, he said that he's been having these dreams of beating up and killing women. When he wakes up after having one of these dreams, he feels better. And that's how he explains it. 2 words. Feel better. So after this, the doctors are attempting to determine through these forensic exams, which if you've never had one, forensic exams are very interesting. For a teenager back then, it would have been a lot of information would have been gathered. But Carl doesn't have any remorse for the assault that he had committed just 3 months earlier. So a doctor ends up saying that there's no evidence of psychosis here. He's a little paranoid and impulsive. His approach to life is passive aggressive. And that he, in 1969, when he's 15 years old, is struggling to maintain control over his homicidal impulses. The doctor recommends that he be released soon and have outpatient treatment. So, one of the other things that comes out during this time is that he's been stalking teenage girls. He's not been doing well in school leading up to this. He's only able to read at what we described as a 4th grade level. He was being bullied. This assault, while it's never 100% confirmed it's him, he never denies it. He says he felt better afterwards. The police don't look for anyone else, and they close this assault out. One of the comments made much, much later by doctors at the time is they believe by the time they got him, he had already killed someone. I don't know how true that is. We do get a few pieces of information out of this time. There was a psychiatric assessment done where Carl Watts was revealed to have had a mild intellectual disability. And you and I have recently talked about IQ. We don't put a lot of stock in IQ for developing minds, I don't think. But his IQ was registered at 75.
And how old was you?
He would have
when
been 15.
15, okay. Just for a second, what do you think about the doctor at Lafayette Medical Clinic, this forensic psychiatrist, I guess, said that there was no evidence of psychosis?
Well, it's contradicted a little bit because...
Well, the dreams and beating somebody up, making him feel better.
Yeah.
To me, that's losing touch with reality, is it not?
Yeah, they split a lot of hairs there. And one of the things I noticed is much later when they bring these medical records up, because it's going to be about 15 years later when they start talking about the medical records. They say, in the same sentence as they say he's not psychotic and there's no evidence of psychosis, they say he has a delusional thought process, and I wondered what that meant.
Well, and they also say, so it was said by a doctor that he was impulsive and had a passive-aggressive orientation to life and no evidence of psychosis. He's a paranoid man who is struggling for control over homicidal impulses.
Yes.
And the doctor recommends outpatient treatment. Now, how is it that anybody struggling for control over homicidal impulses should have outpatient treatment?
I do not believe that is the way to go.
Okay, and so
it's kind of a failure to treat.
Well, right, and you're struggling to control your homicidal impulses. Well, first of all, if you're having homicidal impulses, that's the first problem. I would say that struggling to control them would make you dangerous.
Yeah, and not only that, I want to clarify this word because I read it 2 different places, and I was like, let me go back and find the source for this. It doesn't sound like much, but they say he was struggling for control over strong homicidal impulses.
Well, that just makes it even more so, right?
Right. So, and for people who don't know exactly what the clinical term is for delusional, I'm going to throw this out there. So, a delusion that you have is when you have a belief that is a core belief or a fixed belief that is not amenable to change when presented with conflicting evidence. So a delusion is not that you're being told you're delusional. Like if you say the sun is purple, and the doctor walks you outside and says, look in the direction of the sun. What color do you see? And you insist that it's purple. And there's nothing wrong with your eyesight. And there's nothing, you're not colorblind. You just insist that that is purple. That would be a delusion. And I'm using a very lightweight one at that. So they acknowledge that he has a delusional thought process. And I think that's a huge deal for someone this young. Watt's psychiatrist at that time, the one who said he had strong homicidal impulses, he thought that Watts posed a threat to society at large. I think that's a big deal.
But he recommended outpatient treatment?
He recommended outpatient treatment.
Okay, those two things don't go together.
Well, November 7th, 1969, Carl turned 16, and guess what happens? They let him out of the mental clinic.
Do you think it was because he was so young?
Yeah, I think it was his age. And I'm going to throw this out there, and like we haven't said this yet. Carl is African American. So the way that he is treated at the time, you have to consider that civil rights during this time are a huge deal.
Do you think that it correlated with his perhaps not being kept?
I think if you go back over the years, and this is just me being speculative, if you go back over the years and you look at Carl Watts' life, he happens to be growing up where Martin Luther King, a year before this happened, would have been assassinated. So you've got the Civil Rights Acts of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Martin Luther King has been a force to be reckoned with and then is killed. And I think that a doctor in Detroit who is, looking at this 15, 16-year-old African-American kid is probably wanting to give him the best life possible.
Okay, that's what I was wondering if you meant it good or bad, but you're saying to put the least amount of restraint while still helping him on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So at the same time that this stuff is being said, here's what you have going on in Detroit. One of the police officers who interrogates Carl after this assault, he writes it up saying, this kid is really, really smart. He's shy, but he has an excellent memory. He remembers things. And that's not how it's presented from the psychiatrist standpoint. And so I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if the kid just presents really well. I've seen that before. And he knows something is going on the inside and he doesn't want to be punished for it. That's a possibility.
Yeah, but he was very candid, unless he was just lying about his dreams and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to tell him what's going on. I don't think those are lies. I can't find any good reason that they would be. But I can tell you that what happens after his 16th birthday, and really for the next 5 years, from the time he's 16, literally turning 16 to almost his 22nd birthday, he is going to be in and out of Lafayette Mental Clinical 10 times. And he's going to have this outpatient treatment going on. He's a great baseball player, a basketball player, and then suddenly he withdraws from his friends. He gets mixed up with drugs. He gets in trouble at school because of how he's treating girls. The words that are used are that he is stalking these girls, and his social interactions with them are considered highly inappropriate. But he's going to tell these people at Lafayette Mental Clinic that he has to play football and he has to box, which he is going to excel at both of these things to a degree. And he's doing that because he's dealing with abusive parents at home. Although every interview they have with his parents indicates that, there's not really anything physically or sexually abusive going on. And we could be splitting hairs there. We know there's some things said to him that I think you used the word verbal, like a verbal abuse might be going on.
Right. I also think that he genuinely believed he was being abused.
Yeah.
But it may not have actually been abuse.
Yeah.
It's a perception thing again, where he had expectations that weren't met, and it went uncorroborated because everybody in the house is like, well, this is just how it is here, right?
Yeah.
But he had higher expectations. I also feel like, so it was determined that, we already said it, but in 1968, when he was 15, he was reading at a 4th grade level, right?
Correct.
So, the reading hallmarks, your overall intelligence, because, you have to be able to read to learn, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really have anything to do with like your IQ, though. I mean, maybe a little bit, but, and so then so we've got this low reading level, and then we've got time where he missed school, which I'm sure what led to him being behind. Then he's got the one attack, and it looks like, everybody's trying to help him as much as possible. And then he's stalking these girls, and it sounds almost more like awkwardness and not reading social cues
Yeah.
than criminal behavior to me. I mean, not the beating part. That's clearly, that's criminal, clearly. But the whole following and all that seems to be maybe coming from a different place, and then it ends up being, you're a stalker or whatever. And that doesn't help the situation, right?
It doesn't. We end up with these sort of weird things occurring in his orbit, like around him. Now, these institutional visits that he has, they result in him being diagnosed as a potential antisocial personality disorder. And I say it that way because there's a couple of things that aren't clear in the records that are brought up. And those records really come up 20 years later, not 15. They come up in a way that it looks like when they say outpatient therapy, what really happens is he's briefly checked into a hospital, and then he has a period of time where he's working with like a counselor. I can't tell if there's medication involved. If that were taking place today, it would be like you had a medication management person, a caseworker, and a counselor that you saw. And that's what I picture. So I don't know if it would have been different in the time period that we're talking about. But he is diagnosed as being antisocial personality disorder. They don't fully label you with that as a young person. They basically say that's what it's looking like. You will end up getting that diagnosis later because it's another thing that has a pretty hefty effect. So he is going to graduate high school. He's 19 years old when he finally graduates in 1973, and he gets a football scholarship down to Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. Now, Jackson, Tennessee is like obviously quite a ways from Michigan. Despite his grades and his sporadic drug use, he's allowed to get there to this predominantly black school because his mom had helped him. He does get a full scholarship. He's a running back, and he, by all accounts, enjoys the exercise. The football player side of him seems like he's going to be a big deal. And he is still, going through all the exercise training that's going to allow him to become a Golden Gloves fighter. But 3 months into the semester, he ends up being dismissed from Lane College. Now, depending on when you ask him and how you ask him, he describes having a severe knee injury. There are accounts that this was a much more minor injury. Now, one of the things that is referenced during this time is that he is charged with stalking and similar assaults to the punch that he had given to the young lady back when he was a paper delivery boy. This is the first time he actually becomes a suspect in a killing. And that is linked to him basically being asked to leave, doesn't want to leave, but he's expelled. According to all accounts, he briefly goes to Houston, Texas, but then he moves back in with his stepfather and his mother in Detroit, and he stays there for about 6 months. I'm not 100% sure about like what goes on in Houston at the time, but he becomes a mechanic during this time for E&L Transport. He also becomes a suspect in a murder that took place a couple of years earlier. And that is going to be the change in things, I believe. We have this potential Tennessee homicide. We have this homicide that they start to look back on. Now, because we're going to be spending a little bit of time on him, we're going to talk about how these murders come to be. And we're going to start off by just talking about the first two. So the first murder is September 6, 1972. By all accounts, Carl is still a high school student. Now, this is the first official confirmed murder. Rumors have circulated about him being involved in this. As to whether it's actually his first murder is a subject of debate. There is one prior murder that he may or may not have been involved with. But on September 6th of 1972, a 20-year-old named Zenaida Tomez is discovered in a field in Taylor, Michigan, which would be off of North Line Road, adjacent to an area called Lane Close. She had 45 stab wounds. Rumors have circulated about this potentially having something to do with Watts. Watts definitely lived here at the time. She had been taken from Detroit and murdered somewhere else. Watts is questioned about it at some point, but they don't consider him to be the main suspect there. We also have the August 16th, 1974 disappearance of a 16-year-old named Nadine Jean Odell. Now, she had literally been in Inkster, Michigan. She was on her way to babysit her boyfriend's siblings. She was last seen walking down John Daly Street, and she's never been seen again. At 10:45 a.m. on October 25th of 1974, Carl Watts knocked on 23-year-old Lenore Nizaki's apartment door, and Watts told her he was looking for Charles. She unlocked the door while it was still chained, and when she responded no Charles lived there, she asked if he wanted to leave a note. She undid the chain lock and went to get a piece of paper, and Carl Watts attacked Lenore. He choked her into unconsciousness. Lenore called the police, and the police came, but they were unable to find who had attacked her. And I actually think that's like kind of a good place to leave off with him, with just those two.
I have a question.
Yeah.
He went to the door.
Yep.
He wanted Charles.
Yep.
Charles doesn't live there.
Yep.
So she's going to give a note to whom?
Look, I can only give you the information that's been supplied here.
I understand that, but does that make sense to you?
No, a lot of this.
You want to leave a note for the person who doesn't live here?
I'm with you.
Yeah, no, it was weird.
Unlocking the door was a really weird thing there.
Sometimes, and this was, a long time ago, but sometimes you want to be polite to strangers, right?
Yeah.
Especially people who are having, a problem, clearly. I don't know why that would have made sense to anybody, but maybe in context it did.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, we're going to spend some time talking about him over the next couple of episodes here. I just thought we'd start here and kind of leave off with like murders occurring this early in his life. The next episode we'll pick up with him kind of geographically. We'll go through more of the profile, and we'll talk about how many murders we think he's committed versus how many murders he potentially could have committed.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrattiCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.